Howdy. You know, lately I've been wondering what the hardest hitting super in Destiny is ever since the Renegades update, especially since there's been a lot of updates and buffs to both certain abilities and pieces of exotic armor. So I tested a lot of them, and I gotta be honest, some of the buffs really took me by surprise. Sorry if I sound really tired, by the way. I stayed up very late doing this. But anyway, why don't we go over the damage numbers, but real quick, a few things to keep in mind. 1. All damage was recorded with my super stat under 100, mainly because I just wanted to get a good base damage number for each super. So yeah, every damage number we go over today could basically go up by around 45% or so if you tested that super on your own with your super stat at 200. 2. Supers can be inconsistent. Perfect example, here's me hitting an ogre with Chaos Reach and getting a damage number. Then I run it back right away and hit with Chaos Reach again, changing absolutely nothing and getting a slightly different damage number. In most cases though, I tested each super more than once and just took what I'ma call the BPN, aka the best possible number I was able to get with that super. And finally, number 3. I know that every class in the game is capable of getting exotic class armor with the Spirit of Star Eater. I did not record those variations just because, again, my goal was to get base damage numbers. If you're wondering how much harder a prismatic super hits with Spirit of Star Eater, just add 70% more damage to whatever number I show. Except Nova Bomb, which I believe is an extra 50%, and Twilight Arsenal is an extra 25%. Alright, enough yapping. Damage time. Starting things off with Warlocks. Slova Bomb hit the Ogre for around 9,234 damage, while the Vortex Nova Bomb hit for 9,291 damage. Nothing too crazy. Nova Warp, which got buffed in Renegades, hit for 11,758 damage if you're just spamming the light attack. Nova Warp did hit for 16,001 damage if you're fully charging up those explosions each and every time though. I got curious though and put on the Astrocyte Verse helmet, and with that added into the mix, Nova Warp hit for 18,741 damage total, only using fully charged up attacks. And of course, occasional help from Astrocyte Verse. Next up, Daybreak, which was really just an excuse for me to try out the buff on Dawn Chorus. Regular Daybreak did 12,143 damage total. Putting on Dawn Chorus though bumped up that number a lot to 22,721 damage total. If you add Ember of Ashes into the mix along with Dawn Chorus, you get 23,052 total damage. Not freaking bad. Chaos Reach hit for 11,310 damage total. Adding the Geomag exotic boots bumped that number up to 21,770. Kinda wild to think that Dawn Chorus now moderately outdamages Geomag, but what are you gonna do? Needle Storm got a buff where it'll more accurately target bosses, which is noticeable in-game by the way. Damage-wise, my Needle Storm did 9,927 damage. Not crazy, but harder hitting than both Nova Bombs. By the way, if you didn't know, I heard a rumor that there's a bug going on with the Matiodoxia exotic armor where your Needle Storm damage hits harder based off your grenade stat. I tested and it's true. At first I did 14,160 damage, then after cranking up my grenade damage, I did 16,689 damage. Gotta love spaghetti code. I'm sure that'll get fixed eventually, but funny for now. Winter's Wrath just got a buff and hit for 17,056 damage total. Respectable. Adding in the Ballador's Wrathweaver exotic bumped that up to 23,069 damage total, which is slightly more damage than Dawn Chorus and Ember of Ashes. Here's what really surprised me though. Storm Trance, which got buffed in Renegades, did 14,151 damage on its own. Adding the Crown of Tempest exotic took the damage number down to 14,049. I tested that more than once by the way, and Crown of Tempest for whatever reason slightly lowered the damage number both times. But remember what I mentioned earlier, supers can be inconsistent. That isn't what surprised me though. Storm Dancer's Brace, which was also buffed in Renegades, took my Storm Trance damage number up to 29,124. That is a lot of damage for a roaming super. Hell of a glow up for an exotic I haven't touched in a really long time. Moving on to Hunters. And if you're saying, hey, that's not all the Warlock supers, don't worry, I got a Excel spreadsheet for later, don't worry about it. Deadshot Golden Gun did 5,845 damage. And because Golden Gun now benefits from Radiant, I tried out Deadshot Golden Gun while while Radiant, and the number went up to 7,004 damage. Marksman Golden Gun did 7,724 damage on its own. Add Radiant into the mix, and that goes up to 9,266 damage. And of course, I had to throw in both Radiant and Celestial Nighthawk 2. All of those together came out to 15,044 damage in just one Golden Gun shot. Not bad at all. And I know this isn't a super, but Bungie did just buff the Still Hunt Exotic Sniper when used together with the Celestial Nighthawk, so I had to try that out. That single shot came out to 7,513 damage. Not bad, considering that is not a super, just an exotic special ammo sniper using a unique attack. Blade Barrage also got buffed in Renegades and did 7,568 damage total. Not incredible compared to everything else we've gone over, but hey, more of a crowd control super. Mobius Quiver Tether was one I was really excited to test, as Bungie had mentioned in an article they were buffing it with the goal of it becoming a quote top tier damage choice. At first glance, I wasn't really impressed and kind of confused. Regular Mobius Quiver did 6,345 damage, and when I added in Orpheus Rig, the damage only went up to 10,001. But after rereading the patch notes, I realized I wasn't using the super to its full potential. Quote, while the super is active, dealing damage now increases the power of subsequent shadow shot attacks and bow weapons. Note, this puts a bar on your screen that charges as you deal damage. When charged, your final shot, or final two with Orpheus Rig, deals significantly increased damage. So I ran it back. This time though, using Mobius one time to make the meter appear on my HUD. Then using a bow weapon, aka Leviathan's Breath, which according to the patch notes should do even more damage now, I filled the meter, which by the way only took 2 shots of Leviathan to do, and then I fired out my final 2 shots of Orpheus Rig. That took my total damage output number to 27,134, which is a lot. That being said though, I will admit this isn't exactly a fair and pure damage test, because clearly I'm throwing in weapon damage along with the super damage. But to be fair, I have to throw in weapon damage, otherwise the Mobius Quiver meter will never fill up, and you need it to be full in order to get the goddamn full super damage potential from the final 2 shots of your tether. It's complicated, granted, but the TLDR is that Mobius Quiver is certainly a way more interesting super now, especially with Orpheus Rig. Just make sure you're using the super properly and filling the meter before you connect with your final tether shot. Moving on, Silk Strike did 12,300 damage. Spectral Blades did 6,857 damage, but that's not really a DPS super, but whatever. Silence and Squall did 8,874 damage total and was really annoying to aim, by the way. Can somebody please tell me why the fuck the super just completely ignores the crosshair on your screen half the time and just yeets off into the night? Seriously, I feel like my hunter is drunk. Anyway, Storm's Edge did 9,426 damage total. Gathering Storm did 8,109 damage total. Regular ol' Arc Staff did 8,316 damage, and that is with doing the Palm Strike attack at the end of that combo. Adding in Raiden Flux to Arc Staff took that damage number up to 20,901. Not bad. That is a long super though, and very annoying to land those hits on a potentially moving target. All right, finishing things up with Titans. Fist of Havoc did 8,634 damage with just ground pounding alone. However, it just got a buff in Renegades where light attacks now up the damage of the next ground pound. Using that little combo ups the overall damage number to 11,428. Pretty good, but the heavy favorite for Arc Titans will probably continue to be Thunder Crash. Regular Thunder Crash did 10,506 damage, while Thunder Crash and the Curus of the Falling Star did 16,097. Not the biggest damage number we've seen today, but great considering it's an incredibly fast one and done super that lets you get back to DPSing with your weapon right away. Hammer of Soul did 10,709 damage on its own. Adding in the Soul Invictus aspect upped that damage number to 11,888, and adding in Ember of Ashes on top of that upped the damage number to 12,802. Burning Maul in ground pound mode did 9,282 damage. Adding in the Pyro Gale Gauntlet exotic upped that number to 9,628. which isn't a crazy big improvement, but remember, it makes your super end much faster, which again, nice because it means you can get back to weapon DPSing faster. The Sentinel Titan Shield Bonk combo did 10,148 damage. Sentinel Shield also got some changes in Renegades though, where if you block incoming damage, you'll get a meter that charges up on your HUD, which essentially powers up your Captain America shield throw. The shield throw does hit really hard actually, but the problem is the more you block with your Sentinel Shield over time, the more damage it takes for your shield meter to get back up to full again. After landing 2 shield throws, the third time your meter tries to fill up, it just takes forever. Still, with this weird mechanic, I was able to hit the ogre for 24,249 damage. Not bad at all, considering that while I was blocking the entire time, I was making a ton of orbs for free. Also, in theory, teammates standing behind me would be doing more damage too. Maybe another day in the future, we can do a deeper dive on Sentinel Shield, but more on the utility side of things, not so much the damage output. Not just the damage output of the shield, anyway. Oh, and because the meter takes so long to fill, that is why adding in the second chance exotic didn't really change things too much damage-wise. Yeah, you weaken the target with your shield, but the meter just takes so damn long to fill. Anyway, Twilight Arsenal did 10,714 damage, and that is just with impact damage alone, no axe whacking numbers included. Blade Fury did 9,656 damage with just M1 melee spam. With the suspend attack and melee combo, that number went up to 10,250 damage, and with M1 spam and the Banner of War aspect, the damage number went up to 13,547. But we gotta do a variation where we add in Synthoceps, because of course we do. When surrounded by at least 3 enemies, Syntho will jack up your super beatdown damage by 50%. As you can see here, I activate my super and whack a Hive Knight without Syntho on and do 766 damage on the hit. Then after putting Syntho on, I whack the Knight again and do 1,149 damage on the hit, aka hitting 50% harder. So if we add Syntho into the mix, the M1 spam on our super now goes up to 15,035, and if we add in the suspend and melee combo, because Syntho does also improve the suspend damage as well, we get 15,788 damage. By the way, reminding y'all that this damage testing is pretty imperfect because sometimes the ogres slide around the map when you push them and hit them with your super melees. Did the best I could. Good rule of thumb would be to just take all these numbers today as a concept or a baseline of super damage in general. Don't carve it in stone. Finally, we come to Glacial Quake, and if you've been away from D2 for a while, it's probably good to remember just how powerful the super can be in the right situation. If you spam light attacks only, you get a respectable 11,872 damage total. If you add in our old pal Synthoceps into the equation, that number goes up to around 16,843 damage, give or take. But remember, Glacial Quake also has a heavy slam attack. If you're standing the perfect distance away from a boss and repeatedly mashing the button to spawn stasis crystals over and over, the crystal explosions really rack up the damage. On its own, Glacial Quake crystal spamming racked up 24,982 damage. Adding in the Whisper of Fissures fragment took that number up to 28,941. And I know I said I just wanted base damage numbers, but god damn it, I was curious. I put on Prismatic Titan with the Star Eater exotic class item, and that took Glacial Quake's damage output up to 37,470. Jesus. But we can do even better. With Synthoceps added into the equation, Glacial Quake and Whisper of Fissures and ground pounding from the exact right distance away did 49,366 damage. Good lord. And for the record, I tried that old trick where you have somebody put a Titan bubble on the boss and then you spam your Glacial Quake a bunch, which in theory should keep all the crystals more condensed and focused on the boss. But I do believe Bungie has tweaked that strategy that only put out 19,981 damage. Unless I was doing it completely wrong, but I don't think I was. And there you go. If you're curious, I'll link my damage testing sheet down in the pinned comment. I will also link my Twitch and Patreon pages. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. No, I'm just kidding. Hope you found the info useful. Thank you very much for watching. See you on stream.